want to go out and like really do something.
I say it, I say it again. You've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked. Bamboozled.
It's a celebration, fellas. Salute.
Always do the right thing.
That's it?
That's it.
I got it. I'm gone.
The way of the future.
The way of the future.
The way of the future.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to Duel of the Greats, folks. This week, it's Undercover Week. We got it. We're in here. We have infiltrated, and now we're ready to talk about two of the movies that I don't think I would be alone in saying that they might be top three for both directors. Could probably certainly argue for that either way. But two very good films, both nominated for multiple Academy Awards, both won multiple Academy Awards. Martin Scorsese's first Oscar came for The Departed, which we're going to talk about. And Spike Lee's first Oscar came for BlacKkKlansman, which we're also going to talk about. Martin Scorsese's, of course, was for directing, and then Spike Lee's was for writing, along with Kevin Willmott, the movie. So we're going to dive right in, folks. This is going to be a good week. These are two very good movies, and it's going to be a tough decision for all of us. So, Nate, why don't you start us off? I can't remember what we talked about last episode. We should look this up. We should write this down. But you can choose which one we start on. But it's gonna be a tough week.
It will be a very tough week. These are both great movies. I'll start with BlacKkKlansman just to kind of give a little bit of my personal background with it. Kevin Willmott is a co-writer on this movie, and he is a professor at the University of Kansas. And I happen to know him casually. I took classes from him many years ago. He wrote me a letter of recommendation for something. I don't know if he'd actually remember me now. But I actually saw BlacKkKlansman in a movie theater with Kevin Willmott. There was a special screening of the movie, and he did a little Q&A about it. And it was very interesting to hear his process. And I think if you know a lot about Kevin Willmott's work, which if you don't, both just as a writer and just as a filmmaker, he's a film director, you should definitely look into. I think you can definitely see these moments in BlacKkKlansman that are really embedded with Kevin Willmott's personality. Like Spike Lee, he really tackles race in the United States of America in a lot of his movies, and he's very interested. One of the classes I took from him that was I still to this day would say it's the most important class I ever took about anything is a class called African American Images in Film. And it is about how Black Americans have been stereotyped through the years in visual media and what that stereotyping looks like and the different kinds of stereotypes. One particular moment is he would show us there's a scene in the movie Birth of a Nation where there's this like Black Congress and they're all just complete idiots and buffoons and they're literally acting like they're in a racist way they're portraying these Black Americans as acting almost like animals. They're like jumping up on desks and chewing on their toes and stuff, and there's a shot of that. They actually use that, so obviously they're watching at one point in the movie BlacKkKlansman, they're watching Birth of a Nation. He does a whole thing on Birth of a Nation in his class and really breaks down all the stereotypes of African Americans in that. Um, as for the movie BlacKkKlansman, what always sticks out to me about this particular movie, and I mean, I'm pretty confident in saying this. There's other movies definitely have their moments. I think this is absolutely Spike Lee's funniest movie. There are elements of it obviously that are not supposed to be funny, but there are definitely elements of it that are supposed to be funny. And this gets, for me, multiple genuine laugh out louds. Obviously, the entire premise, which is a true story, is itself kind of crazy and funny a little bit on the surface. But there are these micro moments that are just the way the dialogue is written and how snappy it is. Where they're talking at one point, they're talking about he's already well. At first, there's the whole scene where he calls first. Ron Stallworth calls first. Ron Stallworth was Black, and he's going through this whole thing, and the whole department kind of turns around. He's going on this racist tirade. over the phone, and the whole department turns around, and he hangs up, and the guy just goes, "Did I just hear you use your real name?" And he goes, "Oh shit!" Like there's stuff like that. When he's walking through this plan of how like I'll be on the phone and I'm black, and then we're gonna send a white officer in to go undercover in person. And the guy's like, "Can you do that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, sure. With the right white man, you can do anything." And there's just all these little micro moments that just crack me up throughout the entire
all,
movie.
all the while he pronounces it white. Like every time
Yes,
he says it,
white.
and I don't know if that's just the way John David Washington pronounces it, or if that was intentional. It felt very intentional. But yeah,
Yes.
he was
It
like,
also
with the right
has
white man, we can do anything. I was laughing
this
at that
is
as well.
this is also I think, and we've seen this several times this season, and I can't. You guys will tell me the actor's name. This is the best in the entire Spike Lee filmography. This is the best usage of shit. It's the best one where he's talking and he's like, they're questioning him about like what it's going to be like to be a black officer, and he's like, how would you feel about, someone if someone called you the N word? And he was just like, is there a chance that's going to happen? And the guy, shit. Like it's the best usage of that in the entire Spike Lee
And then
filmography.
there's even a
Um,
subtle little like from the other guy who like puts his hand over to stop him from like
yes,
carrying it on too long. It's
yes,
definitely it was like it's a very almost like reflective sort of moment from that character. That was really good.
yeah.
And I will say I think this goes for both movies. Like despite like the undercurrent of the undercurrent's not the right word, but the themes of the movie are both heavy, for different reasons, of course. Um, but despite that, both of them have almost a lighter, sort of snappier tone, and these are, regardless of whether these may be the two best movies in each director's respective collection, they are, I think, the two most well paced movies in their collections, or in their filmographies. Like definitely on Scorsese's side because I've seen more of his, but at this point I've seen a pretty good amount of Spike Lee's now, and the pacing in Black Klansman, just like in The Departed, was absolutely fantastic. The editing was on point, the pacing was great, the writing, like no scene overstayed its welcome, no scene. There wasn't any. It's easy, I think, for a movie like Black Klansman, that has dealing with the issue of racism to sort of proselytize, right, and to have these moments where people have these grandiose speeches about race and all that stuff, and they never do. The closest you come is you get sort of Adam Driver's internal reflection on.
Which is great. Like
Yeah,
that's maybe
that
my
was a
favorite
very
scene in the
powerful
movie.
scene. Yeah,
Yeah,
where he's talking about his own Judaism and how he never even realized, essentially, how that he was Jewish until he started doing this, undercover work. And it's essentially like, okay, as a white man, he realized he never had to look at himself as if he was someone else. He never had to see how he was perceived through somebody else's eyes. And then he realized with this, okay, black people have to do that every second of every day, and they have to be cognizant of it. And then he was also kind of put in that position a little bit himself because when he was trying to infiltrate the Klan, they hate Jewish people as well, and so they're all, making sure he's not Jewish and doing all this stuff, and so he's got to deny his own faith multiple times and everything, and which he seems to do with no problem in the movie, but it eventually gets to him. And I thought that was a really, like, it's a really deft way of handling it, because it's really easy as a writer, as a director, as an actor to get to or want that big powerful scene, and it never happens. And anytime it even comes close, there's that scene, but then there's essentially the scene at the end where he tells off David Duke, and it's not like a speech, it's just a tirade against him. So I think that may be the kind of genius of this movie, and why it's so good, is that how it gets the point across of its major powerful message, but also sort of holds itself back in that regard. It's under 2 hours. It's not super long. It doesn't have all these grandiose speeches and everything, but still still gets the same point across with it, and that's really hard to do. And the fact that they pulled it off so well is one of the most impressive things about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there, like you said, I think there's a lot of very small, poignant moments. Another one that I really like is when he's talking with the other officer, and this guy is kind of laying out this plan, and he's saying, this is what David Duke does, is they want to legitimize this so that they can get into elected office. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. And Ron Stallworth character says, well, come on, America's not going to elect a white supremacist as president. And he just looks at him and he says, that's a very naive opinion for a black man to have. And it really kind of it's a period piece. It's taking place several decades ago, but obviously it's made at a certain time and during a certain presidency, and it feels
It came out
very,
in
very
2018, so
relevant.
we're in the height.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's definitely right there. Steve, what did you think of Black Klansman?
Yeah, I think it succeeds so well because it's a Spike Lee message movie with some of the sharp edges sanded off until they aren't. Specifically, the juxtaposition of the clan initiation and the telling of the story by Harry Belafonte. He's not. I'm sure he's playing a character. Well, obviously, because it's set in the 70s or whatever. Um, but the character played by Harry Belafonte is playing a character telling the story of a lynching he witnessed in, I believe it was Houston in the 1910s. And it's a very graphic story. And this juxtaposition of the story of this poor black boy being tortured to death and for the entertainment purposes of a white audience, and then seeing these proud white men, celebrating their quote unquote heritage and carrying forward this hate into their current time period. It all the sharp edges come back with a vengeance, and I think that's what makes this movie succeed so well as a Spike Lee joint, and as just a fun, entertaining movie, which I kept coming back to throughout this season. Spike Lee's a filmmaker with a message, a very important message. Well, he's got many messages, of course, but this is obviously the one most near and dear to his heart, obviously and understandably. The black experience and black rights and what America has done to black people and continues to black people. And he wants to tell that story and get that story out there. And I think it succeeds so well in this, frankly, because it lulls white people and privileged people into a sense of, complacency, because it's funny, like you said, it's funny. It's Jeff, you mentioned the pacing. It whips along. It's got snappy dialogue, and then it hits you. Then it hits you with the real big themes. I mean, of course, it's talking about them at the beginning. You mentioned that, but these are kind of the the G-rated versions of racism. They're like, will a cop call you the N-word? That's obviously not G-rated, but otherwise we could say it. But you know what I mean. Compared to the lynching and torturing of a child, it's definitely a bit lighter. So
I think,
that's
yeah, I think
that's why I think this movie is so successful in both veins.
I think also something really interesting that it does that I think is very telling about who Spike Lee is as a filmmaker is that almost teases you with a happy ending. Like they get the bad guys
Yeah.
and even get that like racist cop. They get him, they trick him into confessing to, police brutality and stuff. And there's like this moment, there's this brief moment where it's just like, hey, like it kind of worked out.
Everything's gonna be
Happy
okay.
ending.
Yeah.
Everything's gonna be okay. And then they get that knock on the
We
door,
beat
that great.
racism.
Yep, that Spike Lee, that tracking shot that he uses of them with their guns going, and you see the cross being burned, and it just kind of brings you back. And I think, Steve, to your point, I think that ending really is representative of the movie as a whole. Of just like, we feel good about this. We won the day, but are we winning the war? Are we winning these bigger battles? Amidst everything. So, and it asks, that's I think a question that we're still trying to answer.
And I would even say too, if I had to guess why I think, as far as awards are concerned, why this may have been one of the most well received of Spike Lee's career is I think it's presented in a way that's sorry, it's a little bit more digestible, and there's also, even though there is still a little bit of the sort of pulling out the rug at the end of what we think is going to be a happy ending. As far as Spike Lee movies go, the ending is still pretty happy overall. He gets to call David Duke and he tells him off, and even though they're getting their funding cut and they're not going to be able to. I actually thought that was a really nice touch because it gets, again, because you're talking what you just talked about, Nate, where won the battle, are we going to win the war? And that's where you kind of realize like it's an impossible war to win, because it's not only is there just this entire history of white people with this racism, but they have all the institutions on their side. And they, I got the feeling, I don't know if this was intentional, and maybe it's just sort of my own sort of external ideas that kind of permeated it, but it sort of felt like the scene at the end where they're like, hey, we're having budget cuts, we're gonna have to pull this way, almost like, okay, higher ups who sympathized with the KKK guys that got killed and got put in jail, etc., heard about this and then had to find a way to shut it down. And so that's sort of the institutional side of fighting this war, and how are you gonna, and they all reacted appropriately to where they're just like, this is bullshit, etc., etc., and it was just kind of like, well, what are we gonna do? And that's what the chief guy said, like, what are we gonna do, essentially. And it's just, that's the way it felt to me, where it was like, okay, they can do all this good, but there's still these people behind the curtain that you can't see, that are pulling all these strings that just make any sort of progress that much harder, because you get one step forward by taking down this particular sect of the clan, and then it's two steps back, because now they can't even try to take down more, because they're all going to be sent to different departments now with the budget cuts. So that was, it's kind of defeating after them thinking they had this big win, and then but then he kind of brings it back a little bit, and then that's when he gets to tell off David Duke on the phone and do these sorts of things. So yeah, it's definitely much more palatable than something like Bamboozled, or even Do the Right Thing, or just these, you sort of end on these super depressing notes, these very very grim endings, that it's like, oh man, where you're really confronted with lots of feelings and emotions and things like that. But this one, there's a little bit more happiness to it, and it's, even though it's not a fully happy ending, it's one of the happier endings, I think, of what I've seen of Spike Lee's catalog. So I think that might be why it's a little bit more well received, at least in terms of the reward, or sorry, awards that it got. I mean, do you guys kind of feel that as well? Did you what did you think when it was the budget cuts? Did you think, okay, just budget cuts, they make budget cuts all the time, or did you kind of get the same feeling I did, that okay, there's some institutional racism at play here?
Well, I absolutely think you're right, because the first thing that they're told to investigate is the Black Panthers. And I mean, the whole undercover operation starts is that they're investigating this guy giving a speech at like a black student union for a local college. And even their captain, it says like, you want my opinion, the Black Panthers are the most dangerous internal domestic organization operating in the United States right now. So yeah, I mean, I think that's something that that they're facing all the time. I think in terms of awards that this movie picked up, I think that it was kind of a reckoning for, and we've noticed this the whole season, that we watch these Spike Lee movies from a while ago, decades, movies that are decades old now, and they still, like, they feel really relevant. They really feel like he's speaking to current issues. I think that with, and we try not to be too political here. This was during the presidency of Donald Trump. This is when this movie came out, and I think that what a lot of people begun to realize is that obviously he's speaking and he's drawing parallels directly to the presidency of Donald Trump. I think that what a lot of, I guess I'll just call Academy Award voters, started to kind of realize is, Spike Lee's sort of been right all along. And now he's straight up playing to this very current issue and the current racial climate in the United States of America. And it's kind of made it impossible to ignore. I think that you know, in the Reagan era, in the H.W. Bush era, Desert Storm, I think Spike Lee could make a movie like Do the Right Thing, and a lot of people would probably not take notice of that. They would not take notice of and I think that's evident of the fact that he didn't win a lot of awards for those movies that he made early in his career. I think that time just kind of finally, I think people sort of caught up to Spike Lee a little bit, and they realized what the message that he's been saying all along, that a lot of time, we call it so controversial. He's been such a controversial filmmaker that I'm putting in air quotes, but he's been right a lot. He's been speaking to really real issues in this country. And I think Black Klansman, mixed with the time it came out, mixed with the pacing of the movie and how kind of accessible it is, I think it felt very ripe for, wow, this is the one that's going to probably win some awards. And it did.
I think accessible is a really good term there, because I think, and honestly, we could probably extend that to both these movies, that they may be the most accessible, um, along with the most well paced, which probably goes hand in hand, of course, of the two filmographies here, because it definitely, and I think that goes back to kind of what I was talking about earlier. A lot of where just it's not, um, first of all, the length helps a lot. It's only 2 hours, not like Malcolm X, which, as good as it was, 3.5 hours or whatever, however long that is, that's a tough sell, uh, just of any type of movie to watch. So, but yeah, I think the accessibility quite helps, and yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Think of kind of a reckoning there, and it makes you wonder, if if he being Spike Lee, of course, made Do the Right Thing today, how differently would it be received? You know, and how, I mean, you got to wonder how different film would be up to this point without Do the Right Thing coming along when it did, of course. But it's an interesting kind of idea to think, what would that movie be like today, if he's, because I mean, he not only is he trying to draw the parallels, I mean, at the end of the movie he put in real life clips of multiple instances of racially incited violence, and then occurred in 2017, probably while the movie was filming. And
So yeah, and the movie was actually released. They timed it very specifically. They released it on the anniversary of the Charlottesville Unite the Right
okay,
rally,
yeah, okay, I didn't realize
which was a defining kind of moment in the Trump presidency. I mean, that's where the both sides were very fine people kind of quote came from. It's where fascists literally killed a person at a rally in the United States of America in 2017. And I think that was a moment where a lot of again, I'll just say it, privileged and white people were like, "Oh, this is something that can really happen," And I think black people and minorities and people that in oppressed peoples are like, "Yeah, you dumb fucks." We've been trying to tell you, and Spike Lee in particular, like you were saying, Nate, we've been trying to tell you, and it finally took, this presidency and these things, and seeing literal goddamn fucking Nazis marching uh, for, more white people to wake up. Is it going to be enough? We're still TBD on that, right? We're still living that. But this movie, I think, came along at the perfect time, and he seized that moment and channeled it perfectly. Sorry, I cut you off there, but I just wanted to point out that he very intentionally used that moment, that rally, and video of that incident, and released it on the anniversary of that.
Well, and I also think what makes it super powerful is that the characterization of David Duke, who's obviously a real person, who I think is played terrifically by Topher Grace in this movie, kind of a little bit of a mini renaissance for him. He's not a person that you'd expect to see in a role like this, and I think he's fantastic in it. What makes it so powerful, though, is that it almost seems cartoonish. Like at times that it's, he's clearly he has a worldview that is so morally wrong in so many ways, in any way that we would look at it, that it almost seems kind of cartoonish. But then it's demonstrated by, at the end of the movie, as part of that rally, it shows this actual clip of David Duke saying these things and comparing these things that President Trump had said. I mean, so it's, you can kind of look at that, but I think it brings it home in a much more of a real way to be like, this is a real person. Like, this is exactly what his plan was all along. And I know that there's a moment you may at times lose yourself in the movie and think that this is just a movie character, but it's not. I mean, this is a real person, and there's an actual clip of him saying these things. And I think, again, just tying that footage at the end
Yeah.
is pretty powerful.
I think that is
Also,
important because you're right. They're almost cartoonish. Like
yeah.
it's like, how can anyone be that? Like the scene where Ron takes the picture with him and grabs him and pulls him in real close, and they're like, "Oh my God, don't touch me!" It's like, how can anyone be that full of hate and that racist? And it's just, but no, these are what real people really believe.
It kind of reminds me of another great movie, a little off topic, but there's a fantastic movie called Good Night and Good Luck, and it's about Edward R. Murrow going after Joseph McCarthy. And George Clooney actually is a director there, and they just chose to use the actual clips of Joseph McCarthy that he put out. And people, there were kind of, the famous story of that movie is that test audiences were like, the guy playing Joseph McCarthy is like way too over the top. Like, he's just
Totally
so
unbelievable.
ridiculous and silly. Like he's like way overacting. Like, he needs to tone it down, and they need to use different takes or something, not realizing that like these are the actual clips that he recorded for Edward R. Murrow's show, and like it's literally that guy. They just use the actual clips. So it seems so outlandish, but it's a real thing, and there's really people like that. So yeah.
I read a quote today, and I can't remember who it was attributed to, so I'm sorry about that. But I thought it was really good, where it said, um, "Truth doesn't have to make, or real life doesn't have to make sense, but fiction does." And it's like that perfectly kind of encapsulates exactly what we're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
You simply cannot believe that these people exist, but they absolutely do. And that's sort of the most frightening aspect, and there's the tone of the movie is a little bit lighter than some of his other work, and there's some humor in there, but when you do take a step back and like, it's like you said, Steve, where the sharp edges come out near the end when they get the juxtaposition of the two events going on, of explaining the horrible lynching that happened versus the introduction, or indoctrination of these people into the Klan. And it's just like, man, it's really, it's hard to believe, and it's sort of insane to even think about, but it's an absolute reality. And yeah, that's another one of the sort of greatness aspects of this film, that it can portray that without sort of having to, like, bang you over the head with it, or try and get to whatever with it. But it just presents it as it essentially is in real life. Like,
Yeah.
and that's important with that clip there at the end. So
I think, yeah, to me, this is the best marriage of Spike Lee as, prophet, for lack of a better word, or, truth teller, speaker, man with a mission, and storyteller, entertainer. It's the best that he's done of the movies that we've watched, that I've seen of his, marrying those two concepts together. All season, I feel like I've had complaints, and again, I'm nitpicking. Most of his movies that we've watched have been just excellent, but I feel like I have these complaints about he tries to jam too much in, and the scope creep and all this. This one, it's a fun, entertaining movie, but also it's discussing horrific issues, and he does it well. He ties the bow on it together well. And I
It's
do
like
think that's
he
probably in
almost,
large part because of Kevin Wilmot, I'd imagine.
yeah, it's like he takes these kind of the trinity of Spike Lee movies that I think probably in the end like are his three best, and his three, Do the Right Thing is the one that is probably captures his ethos the most, and we've talked about that, and we've also discussed in this season Inside Man, which is not really a movie like this at all, but it's this really well paced kind of bank robbery movie. And I almost feel like Black Klansman is in a weird way kind of the combination of those two things. To your point, Steve, is like
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
talking about kind of these difficult things, but it's a very commercial movie, and it's I think anyone would watch this movie. I mean, unless you're a member of the Ku Klux Klan, I think anyone would watch this movie and probably enjoy it. So it has a lot of those qualities that I think are kind of present in both those movies, and he sort of brings them together in this one.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because I think you could probably apply this sort of thing to both directors, really, and that they're as far as entertaining directors go, these, as great as both these two are, they're not really in that category. Last season we had Ridley Scott and Steven Spielberg who excelled at entertaining
Yeah.
the viewer.
I'm getting my popcorn when I'm going to one of their movies. I'm
Exactly.
not so
Yeah,
much doing that for these two.
and there's greatness in there as well, as we talked about last season. But this season, it's not as much about entertaining as it is, pathos, as it is understanding, emoting, and these sorts of things. And that's a difficult sell. And the fact that these two directors have been so successful at it for so long is sort of a credit to them both. And that can kind of lead us into talking about the Departed.
Before we make the switch, I just wanted to
All right.
I besmirched the reputation of Houston, Texas. It was Waco, Texas, where they lynched the boy, and I feel like at the very least I can do is say his name too. His name was Jesse Washington. So
I was gonna say we should say his name. It's the
Yeah.
lynching of Jesse Washington,
Jesse
and
Washington.
it's literally the bare minimum that us four
Yes.
white guys can do. But like
Yes.
we should say his name. Like we should
Yeah.
remember this person and what happened, because it was truly awful, and one of the many not great chapters in American history. So
It's
yeah.
literally in the Wikipedia section called part of a series on the nadir of American race relations. So
God.
that tells you
what
all
a
you need.
what a Wikipedia article. Yeah, that's what we all want to dive into. Jesus.
But yeah,
Okay.
he deserved obviously a lot better than he got, and at the very goddamn least we can say his name. So Jesse Washington,
Thank you.
and it's Waco, the home of the Baylor Bears. So if you already hated Baylor, there's all the more reason.
Nothing bad ever happened in Waco again. So there you go.
Waco has
Waco
been
perfectly
totally
clean after that. So yeah, it
for
was.
the rest of its
Yep.
entire.
Other than that one thing, nothing. So they're
if
great.
not for that, then it would be pristine. Um, so yes, thank you for bringing that up. It's a good point. I'm glad you did. So, but yeah, to switch over then to the Departed, and we can talk. It's actually amazing. I hadn't seen Black Klansman the whole way through until this week, so it was interesting to see just how similar these two movies are, and they were not in theme, of course, but just in structure, and even to the point where you have the scene we were just talking about earlier, where they were asking John David Washington, or Ron Shelton's character, or Ron Shelton, the character, oh, what would you do if a cop used the N-word on you? What would you do? All these scenarios, and so just this interview process, which very much juxtaposes the sort of interview process that Leonardo DiCaprio goes through in The Departed, where Mark Wahlberg and Martin Sheen are talking to him and being like, "Oh, is this how you're going to do it? Is this all that is?" That was kind of a very similar scene, and I thought that was, and there were multiple other scenes where kind of felt similar, which I thought was really interesting. And with The Departed, it was, I remember when I first saw it, I went and saw it in the theater and just absolutely loved it. And I remember thinking, I hadn't seen as many Scorsese movies at that time as I have now, but even still, even after seeing so many more, it was striking how different the editing was. on that movie. And I remember thinking that is something that really stuck with me because it was which had a lot to do with the pacing as well. But it was so, I was like, that's so interesting that he sort of did it so differently there. And then of course, for those who aren't aware, The Departed is a remake of a foreign film called Internal Affairs that was from Hong Kong. That's right, Steve. I screwed this up before, but it came from Hong Kong.
I think that's right. Now you got me questioning.
Isn't it called Infernal Affairs? Isn't the English
I don't-
translation Infernal?
Oh my God, it is. This
Yeah.
is some Mandela effect
It's
bullshit.
like it's a Mandela. It's
Oh
called
my God.
Infernal
I
Affairs.
literally, up until this very second, I thought this was Internal Affairs for
because
all
it
of
makes
these years.
sense. Like, it would make sense that the English translation is Internal Affair. Like, that makes
Like
a
an
lot
This
more
is
F
some-
and an
sense.
F and a T, you know, a
Oh my
lowercase f kind
God.
of looks like a T. So if you just glance at it
Yeah.
and you're thinking
This
already
is some
internal.
Berenstain Bears.
Wow.
Fucking
Okay. Look at
Kazam.
that. Dropping the knowledge.
Oh
bombs
my
on us.
God.
Okay. Sinbad.
I don't know if I can continue
Shazam.
here, guys. This is,
I'm shook to my core.
yeah. It is. It's
Infernal
Infernal Affair.
So there we go. Well,
That's the
Oh
that's the
my
biggest thing
God.
out of this episode, guys.
Yeah.
The first
that's
movie
the
is called
hottest-
Infernal Affairs.
the hottest take here is that I thought it was Internal Affairs. And it was
Me
totally wrong.
too, man. We've talked. We
Okay.
literally talked about this.
Yeah, multiple
Oh,
times.
weird.
I've watched the movie, and that was what I was about to bring up. So that's insane, and it makes sense because Jack, my wife and I watched the movie a while ago, like years ago, and then she wanted to watch it again recently. She had a day off work or something, and she's like, "I'm gonna watch it again." And she typed it in the search bar to search for it of our smart TV, and there's a Richard Gere movie.
Yeah, like the '90s
Infernal
movie,
Affairs.
right?
Yeah, that came up, and she's like, "Why? Nobody wants to fucking see this Richard Gere movie. What was this coming up for?" And that makes sense because it's Infernal Affairs. Damn it, man! Look at that. Oh man, now I'm embarrassed, but that's okay. We trudge on. We move forward. Okay, Infernal Affairs was the original. We'll just edit this all out. Nobody will even know. Infernal Affairs.
No, we gotta
was
own
the
this.
original.
We gotta own this.
I know. I'm just kidding.
Oh, I know.
But
I'm still.
anyway, the reason I brought that up, so a few years after watching The Departed, and I've seen it multiple times actually at this point, but my wife and I we're like, I was like, oh, did you know this is a remake of a foreign movie? And so she really likes foreign movies. She's like, let's watch it. So we watched it, and the editing is very very similar. And it was interesting to me when I was seeing that because I realized, okay, that's part of the reason. It's sort of an homage to the source material was a little bit of that. So I thought that was kind of cool to see that, but it was, it in a way, this too also sort of really shows the sort of juxtaposition between the two directors, really, because we've got these movies that are so similar in structure, have a very similar, Undercover. That's why it's a theme, and that's exactly what both are doing. But we've got on the Spike Lee film, we've got this social message that is sort of permeates everyone and permeates all our existence, and that's the main theme of that film. Whereas on the Scorsese side, with The Departed, it's much more of a personal thing. It is much more about, okay, how do these people handle this life that they're leading, right? And these, not only the criminals, but then the undercover agents, and how do they handle, how do they process this world of violence and evil people, and what do they do? How do you possibly even come to grips with seeing and forcing yourself to do these sorts of things, and how do you carry that weight? And it weighs on Leonardo DiCaprio's character all throughout the movie. He's going to therapy, he's on medication, he's contemplating suicide, all these things that are very sort of personal, and that you see that sort of through line a lot in Scorsese's work. That, not to say there's no characters with any sort of personal feelings or character arcs or anything in Spike Lee's movies, but it's much more of a sort of pervasive element that he puts in his in a pervasive message that he has in his film, whereas Scorsese, it's usually so much about just the how especially men can internalize these things they see in this world that they exist in and how they struggle with it. And Scorsese has been very public about how he struggles with it as well. And so I find that very interesting when I look at these two movies together and see again how you can have two movies that have a similar premise, and then you can have a very different sort of uh, outwardly message in Black Klansman versus a much more internal, personal one in The Departed. And neither one's necessarily better or worse, but it does make an interesting sort of um, an interesting juxtaposition between the two that we've seen multiple times. And I think with The Departed, it's really it's so there's so many kind of similar to what you're saying about Black Klansman Nate, where there's just these definite funny moments, right? And these moments that are played for humor, and they absolutely are. Like you've got, the scene where Jack Nicholson and Matt Damon are in the porn theater, and he's got this dildo that he whips out in front of him to just make him, make him feel awkward. And then, uh, but then something like, there's a scene where Matt Damon and his girlfriend, played by Vera Farmiga, they're going to sleep, and they're talking about their future prospects of their relationship and getting married and all this, and Matt Damon goes, if something's wrong with this relationship, you got to tell me, because I'm Irish, I'll live with this shit for the rest of my life. And it's like, it was he said it very seriously, but it's definitely meant to have a little bit of humor there. And it's again, there's some striking similarities between these movies, but then you get to that sort of personal versus social aspect, and I think that's really interesting. And I don't know that one necessarily makes one better than the other, but it was interesting watching The Departed, um, knowing that I'm going to compare it to Black Klansman and see sort of how that kind of changed a little bit, because I don't think I ever really truly acknowledged that to the same degree when watching The Departed before. Um, so yeah, that was something that kind of jumped out on me on this rewatch, and it's. But I don't know what do you guys feel? Is this am I onto something here? Am I totally off base?
I will. We're definitely onto something in the way that the two filmmakers, in the way they cut these movies and the style of these movies. My hot take that I was teasing to my co-host before we started recording. I like The Departed. This is not another Casino. I do really like The Departed. I think it's a very good movie. I It's interesting. It's very clearly a sort of career achievement for Scorsese in the sense that he won all his Oscars for this movie. I rarely hear anybody actually state and argue that this is his best movie. Um, to me, I think it's I think it's okay, and obviously we're holding him to a very high standard. I think that this movie falls into a category of, and I sent my co-host, there's this very funny sketch that Seth Meyers did on his show about a fake movie trailer called Boston Accent, about how all of these Boston movies, these Boston crime movies, are basically the exact same movies thematically. I think there are actually a couple other Boston movies that are better than this one. This one's kind of seen as the pinnacle. I really like
Like
two
what?
Ben.
Bring it at me. Bring
I
it at me here.
Yep. The two Ben Affleck movies are Gone Baby Gone and The Town. I like both of those movies more than this movie. Doesn't mean that I dislike The Departed. I think The Departed is very good. I just think if we're talking about that Boston culture and ethos and what guides people and who they are, I almost feel like this movie is really wearing that so heavily that it's like it's almost a little silly and it becomes over the top. Whereas something like a Goodwill Hunting, obviously it feels so much more real. Um, and again, maybe I think maybe the fake Boston accent trailer has really kind of like clouded my view of a lot of the Boston movies because like you really do see the similar more. It starts with him being like, "I'm a father, I'm a brother, but most importantly, I'm from Boston." Like, and it just has like all. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the movie kind of acknowledges this, right? Because you've got in the early scene where they're trying to decide whether or not Leonardo DiCaprio can cut it as an undercover cop. He's like, that's the way you wouldn't, isn't it? You were what did he say? You lace curtain Irish fuck. You were in and then you go into your dad's in Southie and you're dropping your eyes and you're doing all this stuff and it's like so they're kind of they're kind of playing off this a little bit. Like I think they know a little
Yeah.
bit within the movie what's going down.
My other issue with this movie, and this is kind of a small, smallish issue, is the Vera Farmiga character of Madeline, who's this therapist. I think it's a little ridiculous. I think it's so unbelievable to me that this character is pushed into the narrative in such a hard way that she ends up sleeping with both of the like the fact that both these guys are like double agents and they're undercover and each one is a one's kind of a rat in one organization and one is a rat in the police department and she happens to end up sleeping with both of them. It feels like you could have done a little bit more with that character. It feels like that character is really just kind of there to be the love interest to as many of these male characters as she can be. And watching it now, it just wasn't my favorite. It wasn't my favorite characterization. And it's not that I have no issue with her being kind of a flawed character. I just have issue with the fact that it's just so unbelievable that this same woman would happen to sleep with these same two men that are both embroiled in this deep undercover double agent. It just watching it now years later, I'm like, that's a little silly. That seems a little forced. There's a lot of great in this movie. The performances are all great. Obviously, it's like you've said. I think it's paced really really well. It also, of course, is I think it's famously very shocking. I mean, the end of the movie is just insane and spawned memes and people still talk about it to this day. I mean, I remember being in a theater and when Leo gets his head blown off and just like the shock and like I mean people and then just talking about that afterward of just like oh my god like everyone died like they just killed every single person at the end of it. So it definitely has that shock value, um, which I think is kind of impressive for Martin Scorsese just because he has a lot of shock value in his movies and to still be able to surprise his audience like that so many years later or so many years into his career, I think is really impressive. So, but I think this movie's okay. I think it's good. I think it's better than good. I think it's very good. I think it was probably a little bit overrated when it came out. I think they were really ready to anoint Scorsese and give him all the awards, and he obviously should have gotten it for many other movies previous to this. And I just kind of always look at this movie and I'm like, that's the one he won Best Picture and Best Director for. Like, there's a lot of other movies he should have won Best Picture and Best Director for. So I don't know if that's a hot take, but that's my lukewarmish take for the week. Steve, what do you think?
Well, we talked about the sizzling fajita takes before, and you said that this was the equivalent of the hot plate, not sizzling fajitas, but the waiter says, "Watch out, hot plate." You don't touch it, right? I'm sending your hot plate back to the fucking kitchen because this is Martin Scorsese's best movie. The Departed
You heard somebody say it.
is his
Ooh,
best movie.
wow.
What do you want from a Martin Scorsese movie? Now, okay, I will preface it before I get into it by saying, is it, his most groundbreaking? Probably not. Is it the most, the movie where he's trying the most new things? Of course not. But this is the most watchable, the most entertaining. This movie is where he is at his best, where the people he has brought together, which is arguably that's a producer's job, but in the auteur role of director, that's kind of his role too. The people that he's brought together are doing their job at their highest. They're functioning at their highest. And this movie hits on every single like cylinder, despite the silly accents. And I'll even give you that. But that just, it just kind of heightens the it's a little campy, sure, but the Jeff, you talked about pacing earlier. This movie is the best paced movie of any of the movies we've watched in the 2 seasons, I think, of this entire thing. It just chugs along at perfect speed. You don't have time to think about anything too long. You don't get bored. You also don't feel rushed. At least, again, all this is subjective, but I'm not the only person to say this either, of course. Thelma Schoonmaker won a friggin' Oscar for editing on this, which she's won how many of these now, by the way? Like 4? She's,
I think. Is it 4?
3, is it 3? I can't remember, but
At least 3.
Brandon, maybe you can look that up for us while we're doing this. It's not important, but she's, she's a gilded Hollywood person. What do you call that? I don't know. Anyway, the movie is fantastic, and it moves along at a blistering pace. And what else you want from Martin Scorsese? You want a crime movie? This is his best one. Goodfellas, fuck out of here. Casino, I don't give a shit. We talked about Casino. It sucks. You want brooding men with, guilt and Catholic, shit tugging at their...
And for the casino slander in this damn podcast. If you want a third host for season 3, you better tone it down.
I
It's funny. I say that I didn't even pick Casino to win that week. But you know what? That's how good Clockers was. Ever since I've seen that movie now, I've been any forum I've been in, subreddit, whatever, people talk like, oh, what's lesser known movies from the 90s, or what are lesser known gangster movies? I'm always bringing up Clockers. And you know what? A bunch of people talk to me or respond and say, yes, Clockers is awesome. But we're not talking about Clockers right now. Continue with the love for The Departed, Steve, because The Departed part of your conversation,
The Departed,
I'm loving.
So all of these, she's won... Thelma Schoonmaker's won 9 Oscars? No way. That can't be
nominated,
accurate.
maybe.
That's incredible. Anyway, yeah, sorry. We'll edit this out. We'll edit. Anyway, the pacing, the set, you want, needle drops. This movie is, every single needle drop is on point. And it's just riddled with them. And he perfectly, him or the sound person, perfectly layers them in. We've talked about movies earlier in the season where sometimes the music doesn't quite fit, or it's too loud, you can't hear the dialogue. It's perfect in this movie. You want good dialogue. There are so many good lines in this movie, and they're delivered so well. A lot of people had to die for me to be me. You want to be me? I mean, come on. What a line. What a line. And, I'm...
Pick up a cigarette. You want a cigarette? What are you? You don't smoke? What are you, one of those fitness freaks? Go fuck yourself.
Oh, my God. Yeah. At
My
the very
favorite is,
beginning.
One of my favorites.
He's like, who planted these fucking cameras? The guy looks at him, he's like, who the fuck are you? And he's like, I'm the guy who does his fucking job. You must be the other guy.
So, hey, that's a great example. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself. I know I'm not, because a lot of people don't like him. But Alec Baldwin, a little goes a long way. Now, he's a very talented actor, but sometimes he can be a bit much. But he's perfectly calibrated for this role in this movie, and he just nails it. You know who else is perfect in this movie and was nominated for a goddamn Oscar and is just stunning that he was ever nominated for an Oscar, but really actually deserved it for this movie? Marky fucking Mark. Because he's just playing himself. I mean, honestly, right? That's who he is, we think. But I think this is Leonardo DiCaprio's best performance. I honestly think that. I really, really do.
Man.
Ooh, that is a scorcher.
That's scorching.
I really, really think this.
We just watched The Aviator last week.
That's last week we watched The Aviator. Have you seen that movie that we watched last week for this podcast?
He's playing a guy, with some tics. Here, he's playing a guy going through some shit. He's playing a man who is literally just...
OCD is not going through some shit. Let's be real here.
I mean, this is a man whose identity is... He's not been able to come to grips with who he is his entire life. And now he's faced with the literal unraveling of his identity and potential erasure of it. Who is he? That's what he's grappling with. That's what he's trying to figure out, even if he doesn't really quite understand that. And, whether he can, I don't know if he feels that he needs to redeem himself for anything that he has or hasn't done. Like, can he make a name for himself or claim an identity for himself? Can he, do these things even if no one else knows about it? The fact that he's willing to go to the lengths he goes through, it's crazy. And you can see the pain he goes through it. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, I like the Vera Farmiga character. You're right. It's a plot contrivance that she's with both of them, but it's a goddamn movie.
I got a point to bring up about this. Okay, like, I suppose you could call it a plot contrivance, but there's a sort of theme here in the movie about how interconnected all these lives are, and which sort of kind of plays into how interconnected all our lives are. But it goes like, at the beginning, right? We see Matt Damon and Leonardo DiCaprio's characters as kids, and they're both sort of the same, right? And you don't realize at first that Matt Damon's the bad guy. There's sort of a few twists and turns to this movie, because you're thinking, oh, well, Matt Damon's the guy that ends up being a cop. Of course, he's going to be the good guy. Well, no, they sort of flipped that script about a quarter of the way through the movie. But then you've got the Jack Nicholson in the flashback that starts the movie, in this sort of really uncomfortable sequence where he sees the young girl and he's like, "Oh, have you had your period yet?" And she's like, "No," or whatever. And but then that girl ends up being one of the redheaded woman who he's always with. And there's all these sort of connections that happen throughout this whole town, and I think that's sort of represented similarly in this Vera Farmiga character, where I suppose you could say it's unrealistic that she gets entwined with both of these people, but the fact that there's such this sort of small interconnectedness of this area, of this world that they live in, and I think you just have all these webs that are intertwining with each other, and I think that's sort of what that's meant to represent. So whether it's a contrivance or not, I suppose you could argue, but I do think it has a purpose beyond more than just being the love interest.
That's well argued, and
I agree.
I'll get with you on that. Random side note: I don't know his name, but the little boy that they cast as the young Matt Damon is perfect casting. That kid looks exactly like Matt Damon. Like, there's no doubt as a film goer when you go and you're like, well, that's obviously the young Matt Damon character, because that's like literally that's Matt Damon.
This is 2 seasons in a row now, because we had with Saving Private Ryan last season, we had the old guy who looked exactly like old Matt Damon.
Oh, that's
We
true.
Get all 3 of these.
What is it about Matt Damon's face? What is it about Matt Damon's face that makes him easily castable at different ages? That's a question for the season.
He's an everyman.
He's an everyman.
That's a side episode there.
There's just, I love the way that this movie is written too. And you guys know who the screenwriter is. And maybe this speaks to part of the reason why I love this movie. It's a little fella. Well, he's kind of a bigger fella. Not, I am too, so I'm not judging. But his name is William Monahan. You might know him as the writer of Kingdom of Heaven.
Oh.
So, but, the dialogue, while I do remember parts of it I liked in Kingdom of Heaven's, the director's cut, it didn't pop off out of the movie like this one does. Like, there are certain lines in this, like we talked about, that just kill it. But not only is the dialogue on point, the best dialogue in movies, and I think this is probably, Nate, you're our guy with the movie degree, so you tell me if I'm accurate here, but I think this is not only something that is just an observation that I'm making, I think this is what people would say you're supposed to do. The best dialogue for like world building, you use dialogue to world build, instead of having somebody walk up and be like, or use like an interstitial or a sign card or something that says, Frank Costello lived on L Street. You build it into the dialogue where in that opening scene you talk about Frank Costello in the flashback, he talks to the young kid. He says, "You know where I am down on L Street, right?" Like that's using the dialogue to world build. You now know, hey, this kid knows this. You also know, hey, this is a guy that people know who he is. They know where he is. You know what I mean? And this movie's chock full of that. Um, in Police Academy, when Costigan is with I can't remember his name, Anthony Anderson's character, who also gets shot at the
I don't
end.
know if we ever get a name for that guy. But
You're right, we might not. But he says something like to him like, "Black guy in Boston, I don't need help getting fucked, do you?" or something like that. So like that establishes, oh, this is a racist fucking city, which I mean I think a lot of people probably knew even if they didn't know that. But just a lot of things like that. Oh, there's another line where somebody asks Vera Farmiga, "You do probation work, violent offenders?" And she says, "Not necessarily." So that reveals right there a little bit something about how she feels about the people that she's working with. I mean, I don't know. It's really smart dialogue too. It's a really good movie beyond just the pure aesthetics of it and just the way that it moves and flows, but also just the look and the feel of it. The Chinatown chase after the porn movie theater, like that's up there with chase scenes in all of movie history, I feel like. And intention and the nerves. Like, is he going to see his face? Is he not? And then I don't know.
One moment that I'll talk about that if you want to compare this to Infernal Affairs, the OG movie, uh,
I don't know what
there's
movie.
this
yeah, what,
there's this there's this what movie are you talking about? There's
that's
this
the one
great
with Richard
juxtaposition.
Gere? That's the Richard Gere one. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's called Internal Affairs. Is what you're talking about. There's this moment that's really powerful that's in both movies where these two characters, Leo and Matt Damon, get on the phone with one another and they don't say a
Yes.
word,
Yes.
but they really, and it's great. In Infernal Affairs, there's this music playing over it. It's kind of and like kind of building it up, and it's dead silent in The Departed. And it's a really it is a very great moment of showing Scorsese's craft that he uses sound, or rather the absence of sound, to really illustrate points in a very interesting way. Like another real classic example is like the um Goodfellas. What am I funny to you? Funny like a clown. And there's this really long pause in that
Mm-hmm.
scene between Joe Pesci and Ray Liotta, like uncomfortably long, until finally Ray Liotta is like, "Man, you're fucking with me, man," and then they all kind of like burst. But you don't even know in that moment if it's real or not. I do love
Yeah.
that moment where he uses that. Any filmmaker, and I'm not criticizing the original filmmaker, but a lot of filmmakers, they think, I need all these tools to create this tension, and in this moment
Yeah.
Scorsese says you don't need anything.
The
I don't
silence
want a
is what
single
makes the
set.
tension,
The
right?
silence is what is scary and kind of freaky about it, because they both know, and they're neither one of them's gonna say anything.
Yeah.
And so I do
And
think
there's
it is. It's a very high point of his craft. I will give you that.
and even like even to add on to talking about that specific scene, like there's so many small details in this movie, but like the fact that when Matt Damon pulls out the cell phone from the evidence bag to call, and it's still got blood on it, and you see slightly he puts his thumb on the talk button to put the call through, and leaves a bloody thumbprint of his bloody thumbprint on this piece of evidence. And like it's just such, I remember just being struck by the visual
Yeah.
nature of it. And I think, Steve, to your point, it's the the fact that he can make, he being Scorsese, a movie so accessible, so entertaining, but then also, you know, such a personal, like this have such this pathos of the DiCaprio character, and even the Matt Damon character and Vera Farmiga character as well. Like they all have interesting arcs. They all have a journey that they go through, and it all makes sense. It all is it's earned. Everything that happens, you know, like when you've got, because it's not just, you know, the end when after DiCaprio has died and Vera Farmiga opens up the package that he says only open this up if I'm dead or whatever, and she listens to the CD and it's Matt Damon talking to Costello and saying all this shit, and she's like, she's in disbelief that it's like actually she's listening to it, but at the same time it kind of makes sense because we saw throughout the movie these sort of seeds being sown in her mind about how maybe this guy isn't who I thought he was. And because if they were sort of just happy and then all of a sudden DiCaprio or then all of a sudden, you know, she hears this thing and then she's like she blows up at him, it would feel, I think, maybe a little bit unearned because you'd be like, well, you'd probably ask like what's going on here, what is this? But these seeds throughout the movie have already been sown of how she's starting to doubt her relationship with Matt Damon's character. And then this is sort of the final straw. And her anger is so palpable, and you see it, and it feels completely earned. And everything that every character goes through and the feelings that they have feels completely earned. And the fact that, like, just the fact that you can have such an entertaining movie, but also with, you know, a movie that's got as much sort of um, feeling and emotion and dissection as a lot of his other great ones is part of the greatness of The Departed. You know, I don't know that I would call it myself um, Scorsese's best movie, but I might put it in his top three. You know, I we talked last week about how much I loved or love The Aviator, and earlier in the season about Raging Bull, but I might put this right behind those two, to be honest. So, and it's what, you know. Similarly, I'd probably put Black Klansman up as a top three of Spike Lee's as well. So that's what
Do
makes this week so difficult. But
you want to know why I think this one is better than the others? I mean, well, you guys know my
of course,
take on Raging Bull.
That's why we do this podcast.
Funny story. There's a medium we have that we can actually use to explain these things to each other. So you know my problem with Raging Bull. It's functionally plotless, and it's just this one just asshole's life, and he's just a real fucking asshole the whole time. And there's no real development in this fucking asshole's life, and he's just a big fucking asshole. Did I mention he's an asshole? And I don't want to be around him.
How do you feel about the Jake LaMotta character?
He's a little bit of an asshole. Now, obviously, there's assholes in this movie, but there's a plot. And actually, I guess I didn't know this, but when he won the award for Best Director, Scorsese said something to the effect of like, "The only reason I won is because it's the first movie I directed with a plot," or something like that. So that's kind of funny. But that is a big part of it, I think. And also, so that's a big difference. First of all, it does have a real tight, you know, plot. Well, you know, there's some intricacies, but regardless, compared to Raging Bull, it's got a very defined plot. And even The Aviator, to a certain extent, you know, it's not a biopic. It's you know, character driven and plot driven at the same time, but it's not just.
It's
a story
interesting
of
to
a man's
like
life.
it's almost like a, sorry to cut you off. It's almost
No,
like
no,
a
no.
mental exercise of, if you ask just like plain like what's the log line, like what's a movie about? Almost every Scorsese movie is you're talking about a person. So if
Mhm.
like even if you're describing Goodfellas, you'd be like, it's about this guy who kind of grew up around mobsters and he sort of wants to be one and he kind of
Yeah,
becomes one, but he's never really in the. If you're just and Raging Bull, you know, it's about Jake LaMotta and sort of these, you know, highs and lows of his life and stuff. This is the one that you wouldn't even say, you wouldn't even talk about the characters. You would just be like, okay, so there's police and there's organized
yeah.
crime. And organized crime has one, like you described the plot
They
of
got
it before you
moles.
described any of the people in it. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good point. That's a good
that
point.
is. It's an excellent. Yeah, it's his most plot heavy, I
Oh,
think,
far and away.
of the ones we've watched. But also, and I've saved this for far too late in the podcast, but maybe we'll do a special on it all on its own because it deserves it. This, I think, this movie doesn't live or die with, but this movie reaches the heights it reaches, I think, in large part because of Jack Nicholson too. This is one of his best performances. He brings a manic energy and a menace that is not present in any of the other Scorsese movies we've watched. I love Robert De Niro. He's a really great actor in certain roles, but he does not scare the shit out of me. Like in Cape Fear, I never once was honestly like scared. Jack Nicholson, excuse me, in this movie, like legit terrifies me. He's the fucking Joker, man. I mean, he really is. Like he's that same character, kind of, but
And I'm pretty sure Scorsese initially offered the role to Robert De Niro, and I cannot remember hearing why he turned it down, but he might have been making like the Analyze This or Analyze That movies at that time. But
I think it was another movie.
yeah, but it's interesting, another mental exercise to imagine how different the film would be, because like I think we've all seen Killers of the Flower Moon, and
The Good Shepherd, by the way.
what? Oh, The Good Shepherd was the movie.
Yeah, so he
Okay.
really made the wrong choice, but better for all of us. Anyway, sorry.
Didn't that also star Matt Damon?
I think so.
Yeah, I think.
Does
But I know
and
De Niro
Robert
directed
he did
Good
he
Shepherd.
directed Good Shepherd, so that's probably
that's
why
probably
he was
why,
busier
yeah.
doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, it does say to direct. Sorry, my bad.
But anyway, but he was in it too as an actor. But anyway, so I think we've all seen Killers of the Flower Moon, and I think that the De Niro character in Killers of the Flower Moon might be a little bit of a preview of what we would have gotten as if De Niro was playing Frank Costello.
I think that's a pretty good guess.
And it would have been a completely different movie, I think.
Yeah, much
And
more
it's
kind of
interesting
understated.
how- Yeah, because
Yeah.
I totally agree. Like the scene where Jack Nicholson he's drawing like the mountain of rats, and it's sort of near like the final third of the movie, and DiCaprio's talking. It's the one where he's like, "Heavy lies the crown." That scene, and he like smashes the fly with his hand, and then he
Yeah,
drops it off and
it's
eats
like,
it,
are
and then he
you fucking
impersonates
kidding?
the rat, and then he
Like that
like
could very easily be like just too much, right? You know, just
yeah,
easily go too far.
yeah, but Jack Nicholson fucking kills it, and he drops the gun, and then he picks it up, and all of a sudden it's pointed at DiCaprio. There's a ton of tension in that scene, and like it's remarkable. And it's fun. It's funny too because I believe I read somewhere that the part where like because Jack Nicholson leaves, and the part where he comes back and sort of sneaks around and takes his cigarette that was still lit, and like DiCaprio kind of like jerks and looks at it. That was not part of the script and not planned, and Jack Nicholson just did that. So that was DiCaprio was actually
Oh wow.
scared, or not scared, but like actually kind
Yeah.
of jumped because he wasn't expecting it. So that's kind of a fun little thing. But
That's man, it fits perfectly with the character too, because I mean he's
it
so
does.
paranoid in that moment.
And I don't think Robert De Niro would do that. Again, nothing. I mean, Robert De Niro is a freaking legend, so I love him as an actor. But it's just talking about the differences between the two, and I don't think even if he's allowed to improv, I don't think he does that. And it's yeah, I totally agree that Jack Nicholson seemed like an odd choice at the time because it's not your usual suspects for a Scorsese movie. But yeah, he nailed it.
Matt Damon tells this funny story about there's a scene toward the beginning of this film where they shoot this couple kind of like on sort of a beach with an airplane going kind of near the airport with an
Yes.
airplane going overhead. And I guess the script literally was just like Costello shoots them both in the head. Like that's it. And it was entirely Jack Nicholson, and they only used a little bit of it, but like he riffed on this for because he shoots the woman, and then there's kind of this pause, and he goes, "She fell funny," because she kind of falls a little bit diagonal. Um, and I guess Matt Damon has said like he did so many like they did a few takes of this, and he could go for like 2 or 3 minutes on each of these things and just like keep talking about the situation and just kept going and going and going. And they finally were just like, we're probably just gonna use like the she felt funny to like to cut it, but like it shows how much he can add to
Yeah.
to your point of how
It's
it's just
great.
like he's a fucking psycho, but he plays it so well, and it is so creepy and weird, and yeah.
He understands the character and what a psychotic person he is.
And
It
Ray
also
Win,
sets up. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say we haven't even talked about Ray Winstone, and he plays off of that so
Yes.
freaking well. Like the
Yes.
scene
I'm glad you're
where
saying
they
it.
have the severed hand, and he's handing it to Jack Nicholson, and he leans down and he's like, I thought it was very respectful how you asked him which hand he jerked off with. And it's like, man, like it's just such a like this, and again, stuff that would be like, this is so asinine, a severed hand and all this stuff, but they
Yeah.
sell it so well and they make it work.
Well, you gotta you got me excited, and then you pulled it away. In that scene about the she felt funny, he says right after that, he turns Ray. I think that's Ray Winston. He turns to it's the same guy, right? His heavy or whatever that guy's,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
his
French.
yeah. He turns to Costello and goes, Francis, you really ought to see somebody, like a a therapist or something. I mean, it's a movie. It's something that should horrify us, and it does, but it's just so perfect. That's awesome to know that that was essentially ad-libbed. What a movie. And that's not even, I was talking about identity earlier. This is not even scratching the surface of the whole. I didn't even know this was a theory until rewatching it again this time. Have you guys heard about the Matt Damon's character is secretly gay? There's lots of potential clues to that, or at least that he's
I've
hiding.
heard the
Yeah.
I've heard the kind of he's what's the word, impotent. Like they kind of have scenes like that where he talks about that.
Yeah.
He also really there's this really awkward scene, and this is weird for like a bunch of guys to be talking about because it's like such a toxic thing, where he's with Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin is hitting golf balls, and
Oh yeah.
he's like, "Yeah, how's your?" And he's like, "Well, I'm glad your dick is working." He's like, "Oh yeah, it's working. It's working
Overtime.
overtime." And
Overtime.
it's just like, really like no one. Methinks the lady doth protest too much. Like that's
Yeah,
no one's
yeah.
really like talking like that. That's kind of weird to like really go out of your way to brag about. And
Especially after we
so
have seen, like you said, that he had an impotent incident earlier
Yeah,
in the
and she's
movie.
like, "Do you want to talk about it?" And he didn't even answer. He just like stares at her as he's eating cereal,
Yeah.
like a
yeah,
goon. And like, just nope.
So
Yeah.
I mean, identity and what it means to be a man, machismo, and toxic masculinity. These are all things that Scorsese is a talked about again and again. And here I just feel like he's hitting at his peak.
And the ability to show vulnerability as a man. There's the
Yeah.
scene where when Leonardo DiCaprio and Vera Farmiga finally get together, and
Yes.
she's
Good.
like, "You're
Excellent
really
point.
vulnerable right now. Is this real?" And he kind of takes for a second and thinks about it, and then he's like, "Holy shit, yeah, it is real," and sort of comes to that self-realization. Um, so yeah, I mean, I could go on talking about this movie for so long.
It works
So
on many, 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 many levels.
it
And
does. So I think we should wrap it up and get with the votes. So I'll take first this week, and my vote, probably to no surprise, is going to be The Departed, and it's because
you gotta say it right though.
The Departed, and
There you go.
it's similar to last week, right? Where last week with Malcolm X versus The Aviator, the message, the importance of Malcolm X was greater, but just the sheer power of the filmmaking of The Aviator was enough to overcome. And I feel similar this week, where the message and everything in Black Klansman is more important, but just the sheer power of the filmmaking. Like I will agree to your point earlier, Nate, that there are movies that are more deserving of Scorsese to have won an Oscar, but I also think this was deserving to win. I mean, the fact that he only has one Oscar is the crime here, right? Because he should have multiple at this point.
Yeah, both can be true, right?
Yeah. But so anyway, I think like the Departed is just it's just a fantastic film, and it was as good as Black Klansman is. And again, I would probably rate it in the top 3 for Spike Lee. It's just too good. It's too good. The Departed. So that's my vote. Nate, what do you got?
I'm gonna vote Black Klansman. But you guys have made really great points about The Departed. I mean, they're both great movies. I think my final tally will just be that this is again completely subjective. I think in the Boston crime movies, I think there's other filmmakers that have even done that a little bit better than this particular movie, and I don't think there's another filmmaker in the world that can make a movie like Black Klansman that would even try. And so, in comparing these two filmmakers for this week, that's just the logic that I'm going to use. I'm sure I've probably, worked my way into a corner there because I'm sure I've used the opposite logic in other weeks. But to me, this is just kind of one of those things where it's like I think The Departed is a really good movie, but I don't think it's. I think he's made better movies. So I disagree with Steve. I think he's definitely made better movies than this. And I think there are other even like Boston crime movies that other filmmakers have made that are better than this, whereas there's no other movie that's like Black Klansman or any other filmmaker that could make a movie like Black Klansman. So I'm going to vote Spike Lee this week.
To be clear, I want to just because in case it was possibly misconstrued earlier, I'm talking about The Town. I absolutely love that movie. So I
Yeah.
just want to make that clear. So I do love that movie as well. And it's interesting because I actually agree on Spike Lee being the only one that can make Black Klansman. It's funny because we've said that multiple times this week this season, that
Yeah.
movies that Spike Lee has made, specifically Bamboozled, I think, I just don't think there's any other filmmaker on the planet who can make them, and that says a lot. But unfortunately,
Yep.
in this, got to go with The Departed this week. Steve, break the tie, give it to us. I think we know which way you're going, but I want to hear you say it.
So when I sat down to rewatch these movies, I rewatched The Departed first. And I hadn't actually seen it probably in, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years. And as I was rewatching it, I'm like, this movie is so good. It's so, so good. I don't know how anything's going to top this. And also, I also was like, I didn't want to be outcome determinative, but I'm like, it's going to be better if Scorsese wins, because then we'll have, the final podcast. I'm not going to have that make my decision, but that would be better. Because the final week would be the tiebreaker. And I was watching it, and I was like, I don't see any way the Black Klansman's going to beat it. I turn on Black Klansman. I'm rewatching it. I love Black Klansman. I loved it when I saw it. And it wasn't hooking me the same way The Departed did. But then it got to the scene with Harry Belafonte. And there's nothing, that scene is so moving. And there's just nothing quite like that. And I really, really, I struggled with this so much. So much. After I watched the movie. And then the ending with showing the Charlottesville and dedicating it to Heather Heyer and all that. And so I've wrestled with it. I actually have been wrestling with this decision for the past couple of days. And I'm actually really enjoying right now seeing you guys, all three of you, just completely on tenterhooks trying to figure out what's going to happen.
Keeping us on the edge of our seats. Okay.
We got
And
a
then-
major appeal to emotion here.
Oh my God.
I've literally waffled throughout this podcast on my decision as well, based on your guys' arguments. But the excitement is going to last another week. It's The Departed. For one simple fact.
Whew.
One simple fact.
Whew.
Everything both of you said is, you're wrong about The Departed not being a good movie. You're wrong.
I didn't say that.
You
I
said you
it's
said it
good
was a
movie.
terrible movie. You said it was the worst movie ever made.
I didn't
Said
say that one
this
time.
movie should be in the bargain bin.
You said it's
at
worse than
Walmart.
1941, I believe.
It's worse than Cape Fear. He said.
Again, kind of like the Bamboozle. I think maybe even Black Klansman is more important again than Departed. I mean, actually, it is. It's definitely more important than Departed in terms of being a movie. And everything I said about it is true. It is Spike Lee's probably best movie in terms of marrying the two parts of Spike Lee. But I gotta go with everything. The Departed is Martin Scorsese, I think, in my opinion, hitting on his highest frequency. It's him just nailing everything at a level that I don't know that I've seen before or since. And also, in the case of a tie, I always go back to the theme. What's the theme this week? Undercover. And while we did have a guy undercover in Black Klansman, and it did play a big part of the plot, of course, obviously, and it led to lots of laughs. Two guys, yeah. The Departed showed just the sheer emotional toll that takes on the people and what that does to a person, and the role that identity plays, and how being undercover changes a person. So I think it did a better job fitting the theme. So in the case of a tie, go to the theme. Which one fit the theme better? The Departed. The Departed is your winner for week 12. We have a tie going into the final week, and we did not plan this. I swear to God.
Nobody's gonna believe it.
They're really
believe
not.
it.
They're really not.
They're not gonna believe it. Our 2 or 3 listeners, they don't believe it. They think that it's
Mom, I promise you, we didn't.
Mom, Sam. I'm calling out my buddy Sam. He listened to every single one of these. He deserves it. Sam, in
Sam,
Kansas
you've
City.
done a lot, but I need you got to start emailing us. We need people to email us, so we have some,
we need
some
the
listener
engagement.
feedback here.
Even if it's one person engaging us.
It's interesting too, because like we did this last year when we reached this exact same point, and like you go back through all the things. It's not like any of the choices we made are outlandish, you know.
Yeah.
It's not like anyone would be like, oh man, there's no way the Aviator should have won. But, you know, it's just like it just happened that it worked out this way.
The only one I think, looking back on them, that I was shocked by was probably Clockers, and that's just because I didn't know anything about Clockers beforehand. Excuse me.
Yeah. And you know, I've thought about that, and I still love Clockers. I wonder if the fact that I'd seen Casino so many times and Clockers, so that's the only one that I think maybe like the recency bias of having seen Clockers for the first time.
Yeah.
Is what did it. But I mean, I still stand by my choice because that's a
absolutely. Yeah, I stand by all the choices.
That's the only thing that I'm like, okay, maybe that colored my opinion a little bit, but I don't think so, because that's just a really good movie.
Yeah. Well, this was a very, very, very hard decision. Like I said, I literally, I've wrestled with it. I had kind of decided Black Klansman based on some of the arguments you guys had made and the feelings that I had. And then I started thinking about The Departed again when I started going on my spiel, and just the way I reconvinced myself. So we got ourselves a tie, baby.
There it is.
Great.
Which means the decider is next week for the second year in a row. We rest our case, folks. It will be, I will pick the Scorsese movie. Nate will pick the Spike Lee movie. The movie I will pick for Scorsese is The Irishman. Nate, which one are you going with for Spike Lee?
I'm going to pick Crooklyn for Spike Lee. And I think those are honestly both good choices, because like they're not their most famous movies, but I think they really both kind of embody the ethos of these filmmakers in a good way. So I think it'll be a good week and kind of a good final comparison to decide.
Yeah, can we say
if you start The Irishman right after this show, you might finish by next week's recording.
You might finish. You can listen. Yeah, it'd be perfect.
Yeah, can we say like how it's going to work? Like, you guys are going to basically, it's going to be different than usual. If you didn't listen to last season.
Similar to last season, if you listened when Steve and I did this, it'll be, you know, I will talk about The Irishman, explain why I think it sort of embodies what Scorsese is as a director, and why I think it is sort of the movie to push him over the edge. And an important point of this, we did restrict ourselves to choosing a movie that we hadn't already talked about. So that sort of limited our options a little bit. But all the same, you know, why this movie that we hadn't already talked about brings, you know, Scorsese over the edge, or in Nate's case, you know, Spike Lee. And then Steve will kind of be the decider, just as Nate was the decider last year. So it'll be
a lot of pressure
too, because it'll be interesting too, because I'll be curious how that last year's decision is still under protest. So I'll be curious how
it is under protest. Nate, he just totally made the wrong call. If we had an appellate process, I would have appealed it. Brandon agrees with me. Brandon should be the appellate.
Well,
judge.
You get to be the judge this season, so that's why we switched it up. So this, you get the exact same scenario that I had, and you'll see how hard it is.
You just better hope I'm not a vengeful judge.
Can I just say,
okay,
I'm just going to interject. I'm kind of disappointed I'm not going to get to hear Steve give a closing argument for either of the specific movies. as he
I
did
think
last year.
my Departed their spiel was as close as you got.
It was fairly close.
So, yep. All right. So for those following along and want to watch along, The Irishman and Crooklyn, we're going to talk about last week. We will rest our case and we will decide the winner for season 2. Can't believe we're already coming to a close here on season 2 of Duel of the Greats. So watch those movies. Come back next week and we will pick a winner, and that'll be that. So thank you all for listening so much. We really appreciate it. We'll see you next week. Until then, thanks for stopping by.